Rose Boone was measuring feed grain when the stranger walked into her barn with a gun already drawn and her entire life about to collapse. She froze mid-pour, the tin scoop still tilted over the barrel, and met his eyes across 20 feet of dusty afternoon light. He was tall, dark-haired, trail-worn, and his revolver was pointed straight at her chest, with the kind of steady calm that said he knew exactly how to use it. Behind him, storm clouds were rolling in fast over Juniper Ranch, turning the September sky the color of old bruises. He took 2 steps closer. His boots made no sound on the packed dirt floor. The gun never wavered. Rose set the scoop down slowly and straightened, keeping her hands visible. Her heart was slamming against her ribs, but she kept her voice level. "Who are you?" The man's jaw tightened. His eyes were gray-blue, tired, and completely unreadable. "Emmett Cooper, railroad guard." "I'm here about your land deed, Mrs. Boone." The bottom dropped out of her stomach. She forced herself to breathe. "I don't know what you're talking about." Cooper's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Disappointment, maybe, or recognition. He lowered the gun slightly, though he didn't holster it. "The railroad's buying up land along the new route through Sunset Creek. Your property's right in the path. When we went to verify your deed, we found something interesting." Rose's throat went dry. Her hands curled into fists at her sides, hidden in the folds of her apron. He took another step. "The claim's a forgery, Mrs. Boone. A good one, but a forgery. Filed 6 months after your husband died, with a signature that doesn't match any other document he ever signed." The words hung in the air between them like a noose. Rose had known this moment would come eventually. She'd lived with the knowledge for 3 years, every morning waking up, wondering if today would be the day someone looked too closely. But she'd never imagined it would be like this. A stranger, with a gun and storm coming in, and her entire world about to shatter. She lifted her chin. "You going to arrest me?" Cooper studied her for a long moment. The gun lowered another inch. "That depends on what you tell me." Outside, thunder rolled closer. The first drops of rain hit the barn roof like scattered coins. Rose calculated fast. If she ran, he'd shoot or chase. If she lied, he already knew. If she told the truth, she'd lose everything she'd fought for since Daniel died. But there was something in his face. Weariness. Reluctance. Like he didn't want to be here any more than she wanted him here. She took a breath and gambled. "My husband died owing money to half the territory. The bank was going to take the ranch. I had nothing. No deed, no claim, no proof of anything except debt. So I made proof." Cooper's eyes narrowed. "You forged the deed." Rose held his gaze. "I saved my home." He was quiet for several seconds. The rain picked up, drumming harder on the roof. Finally, he holstered the gun in one smooth motion and pulled off his hat, running a hand through his hair. His face looked older suddenly, lined with something that might have been exhaustion or regret. "You know what happens if this gets out?" Rose nodded once, her heart still racing. "I lose everything. And probably go to jail." Cooper turned toward the barn door, staring out at the rain. "The railroad's not just buying land, Mrs. Boone. They're stealing it. The company I work for is run by a man named Vance Holloway, and he's using every dirty trick in the book to push people off their property. Intimidation, fake debts, legal threats. I've watched him destroy 3 towns already. Rose frowned, trying to follow. Then why are you here with a gun? He looked back at her, and for the first time she saw real anger in his face. Not at her, at something else. Because I thought you were one of his. A plant. Someone he paid to file a fake claim so he could buy it cheap and resell it to the railroad for 10 times the price. It's a scam he's run before. Rose's chest tightened with a different kind of fear. But I'm not. Cooper shook his head slowly. No. You're not. You're just a widow trying to survive. Which means Holloway's going to come after you anyway, and when he finds out about the forgery, he'll use it to take your land and probably put you in prison as a bonus. The full weight of it hit her then. She'd been so focused on keeping the secret from the law that she hadn't seen the bigger danger. A corrupt land grabber with resources and no conscience. She swallowed hard. What do I do? Cooper put his hat back on and met her eyes. The look he gave her was complicated. Part warning, part something else she couldn't name. You need a witness. Someone who can testify that your husband intended this land to go to you. That there was a verbal agreement or a lost document. Anything that gives you legal standing. Rose shook her head. There's no one. Daniel's family disowned him when he married me. My family's back east. Everyone who knew us is either dead or gone. Cooper's jaw tightened. Then you need to find another way to prove your claim before Holloway moves. Because he's already in town, and he's already buying up properties around you. You've got maybe 2 weeks before he makes his play. Rose stared at him, her mind racing. Why are you telling me this? Why didn't you just arrest me? He held her gaze for a long moment. The rain was coming down in sheets now, turning the world outside the barn into a gray blur. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and rough. Because I'm tired of watching good people lose everything to men like Holloway. And because you remind me of someone. The words landed with unexpected weight. Rose took a step closer, studying his face. She saw the lines around his eyes, the tension in his shoulders, the way his hand rested near his gun, even though he'd holstered it. This was a man who'd seen too much and carried it all. Who? His expression closed off. Doesn't matter. She's gone. The barn was suddenly very quiet, except for the rain. Rose made a decision. She didn't know if it was smart or reckless. But standing here doing nothing wasn't an option. If you're working for Holloway, why help me? Cooper's mouth twisted into something that wasn't quite a smile. I work for the railroad, not for him. There's a difference. And I've been gathering evidence on his operation for 6 months. If I can prove he's running land fraud, the railroad will fire him, and the territorial marshal will arrest him. Rose's pulse quickened. You need proof. He nodded. Witnesses. Documents. A pattern of illegal activity. Right now I've got pieces, but nothing solid enough to bring him down. She took another step. And if you had that proof, what happens to my land? Cooper looked at her directly. If Holloway's arrested, the railroad deals with legitimate landowners in good faith. You'd have time to establish a proper claim. Maybe get testimony from someone in town who knew your situation. It's not perfect, but it's better than what you've got now. Rose felt something shift in her chest. It wasn't trust, not yet, but it was possibility. And possibility was more than she'd had 5 minutes ago. All right. I'll help you. Cooper's eyebrows went up slightly. Just like that. Rose met his gaze steadily. You could have arrested me, You didn't. You could have walked away. You didn't. And you're right about Holloway. If he's doing what you say, he's not just coming after me. He's coming after everyone in Sunset Creek who can't fight back. So yes. Just like that. Something changed in Cooper's face. The wariness didn't disappear, but it eased. He gave a short nod. Then we need to move fast. Holloway's staying at the Grand Hotel in town. He's got 2 men with him, both armed. He's been meeting with the mayor and the land office clerk, probably bribing them. If we can catch him in the act, or find his ledgers, we've got him. Rose's mind was already working. The land office clerk is Martin Schaefer. He's been acting strange lately. Nervous. Avoiding eye contact at church. Cooper's eyes sharpened. You know him. Rose nodded. Small town. Everyone knows everyone. And Martin's wife is sick. He needs money for medicine. That's how Holloway works. He finds people who are desperate and makes them compromise. Cooper glanced toward the barn door. The rain was starting to ease slightly, though the sky was still dark. Do you know when Martin's usually at the office? Every morning, except Sunday. 9 to 5. Cooper thought for a moment. If we can get into the land office after hours and look through recent transactions, we might find a pattern. Forged transfers, intimidation tactics, payments that don't add up. Rose felt her stomach twist. You're talking about breaking in. He looked at her without apology. I'm talking about stopping a criminal before he destroys your town. Are you in or not? She should say no. She should send this stranger away and hope the storm blew over. But she knew better. Men like Holloway didn't stop, and her forged deed was a lit fuse whether she acted or not. I'm in, but I need to secure the ranch first. Livestock, shutters, doors. Give me 20 minutes. Cooper nodded and moved toward the barn door, scanning the rain-soaked yard. I'll check the perimeter. If Holloway's got men watching properties, they might already know I'm here. Rose grabbed a work coat from a hook and shrugged it on. Why would they be watching? Because I made inquiries about your deed this morning. If Holloway's paying attention, he knows someone's asking questions. And he doesn't like questions. The words sent a chill down her spine. Cooper caught her expression, and his voice softened slightly. Stay close to the house. Don't go anywhere alone. And if you see anyone you don't recognize, get inside and bar the door. Rose nodded, her heart picking up speed again. They worked in tense silence for the next half hour. Rose moved through the barn and outbuildings, checking latches and securing feed stores while the rain drummed overhead. Cooper circled the property twice, his hand never far from his gun, his eyes scanning the tree line and the road. When they regrouped at the ranch house porch, the rain had settled into a steady drizzle, and the light was fading toward evening. Cooper's hair was plastered to his head, his jacket soaked through. Rose's skirt was mud-splattered, and her braid was coming loose. But she'd gotten everything battened down. She looked at him directly. Now what? He wiped rain from his face. Now we go into town and figure out how to get into that land office without getting caught. But first, I need you to understand something. Rose waited. If this goes wrong, you're not just risking your land. You're risking your freedom. Holloway's dangerous, and he's got the law in his pocket in 3 counties. If he catches us, he'll make sure we both go to prison. Rose held his gaze. I understand. Cooper studied her for a long moment, rain dripping from the brim of his hat. Finally, he nodded. All right. Let's go. They saddled 2 horses in the barn, Rose on her sturdy bay mare, and Cooper on a rangy black gelding he'd left, tied outside. The ride into Sunset Creek took 40 minutes through mud and drizzle, the storm clouds slowly breaking apart to reveal a cold, clear sky. Sunset Creek sat in a shallow valley where 3 trails met, a collection of wood-frame buildings clustered around a main street that turned to soup every time it rained. Rose had lived here for 5 years, first with Daniel and then alone, and she knew every face and every building. Tonight it looked different, dangerous. They left the horses at the livery stable and walked up the boardwalk toward the center of town, keeping to the shadows. Most of the businesses were closed, but the saloon was lit up and noisy, and the Grand Hotel across the street had lamps burning in several windows. Cooper touched her arm lightly, stopping her. That's Holloway's window. 2nd floor, corner room. Rose followed his gaze and saw a heavy-set man in a suit standing near the window, cigar in hand, talking to someone out of view. He looks ordinary. Cooper's voice went hard. That's what makes him dangerous. He looks like a businessman, acts like one too, right up until he's stealing everything you own. They moved past the hotel, keeping their heads down. The land office was a small building near the church, dark and locked tight. Cooper circled it once, checking windows and doors. Rose stood watch, her heart hammering. He came back, shaking his head. 2 locks on the front, bars on the windows. We're not getting in tonight without tools or making noise. Rose's mind raced. Then we need another way to get evidence. Cooper leaned against the wall, thinking. His face was half in shadow, but she could see the tension in his jaw. If Martin's taking bribes, he's probably keeping records. Holloway would want proof of the arrangement, in case Martin tries to back out. Insurance. Rose frowned. You think Martin has documents at home? Cooper met her eyes. I think it's worth asking. But we'd need him to cooperate, and right now, he's got every reason to stay quiet. Rose thought of Martin's wife, pale and coughing through Sunday services, and Martin's hollow-eyed desperation. I might be able to talk to him. Not tonight. Tomorrow. After church. Cooper nodded slowly. It's a risk. If he's in deep with Holloway, he might warn him. Rose straightened. Then I'll have to make sure he doesn't. They walked back toward the livery, in silence. Rose was aware of Cooper's presence beside her, tall and watchful, his hand resting on his gun. He moved like someone used to danger, alert, but not jumpy. At the livery door, he stopped and turned to her. Where are you staying tonight? Rose blinked. At my ranch. Where else? His expression tightened. That's not safe. If Holloway knows I was out there, he might send men. She felt a flicker of irritation. I'm not leaving my home. Cooper's jaw set. Then I'm coming with you. The words hung in the air between them. Rose stared at him. You're planning to stay at my ranch. Tonight. He didn't flinch. I'm planning to make sure you don't get killed in your sleep. There's a difference. Heat rose in her cheeks, though whether from anger or something else, she wasn't sure. People will talk. Let them. You'll be alive. Rose wanted to argue, but the truth was, she was afraid. The thought of going back to that empty house alone, knowing Holloway's men might be out there, made her stomach twist. She gave a short nod. Fine. But you sleep in the barn. Cooper's mouth twitched. Wasn't planning anything else. They rode back through the dark, the stars coming out cold and bright overhead. Rose was acutely aware of Cooper riding beside her, close enough that she could hear his horse's breathing and the creak of his saddle. When they reached Juniper Ranch, everything looked quiet. No strange horses, no movement in the shadows. Cooper dismounted and checked the barn and outbuildings again, while Rose went into the house and lit lamps. Her hands were shaking slightly as she set the match to the wick. The house felt different with a stranger's presence nearby. Smaller, more real. She made coffee and brought 2 cups out to the porch, where Cooper was standing watch, his rifle across his knees. He took the cup with a nod of thanks. "You should get some sleep." Rose sat down on the porch step, wrapping her shawl tighter. "I'm not sure I can." Cooper was quiet for a moment. Then, quietly, he said, "You did good today. Keeping your head, not panicking." Rose looked at him in surprise. "I held you at gunpoint in my barn and confessed to forgery. I'm not sure that counts as keeping my head." A faint smile crossed his face, there and gone. "You made a hard choice fast. That takes guts." The unexpected praise made something tighten in her chest. She took a sip of coffee to cover it. "You said I reminded you of someone." The smile vanished. Cooper's gaze went distant. "My sister. She was widowed young too. Husband died in a mine collapse. Left her with nothing. She tried to hold on to their claim, but the mine owner wanted the land. He used every legal trick to push her out. By the time I found out what was happening, she'd lost everything." Rose's throat went tight. "Where is she now?" Cooper's voice went flat. "Dead. Took her own life 2 years ago. Couldn't live with the shame of losing her home." The words hit Rose like a fist. She set her coffee down, her hands suddenly unsteady. "I'm sorry." Cooper didn't look at her. "That's why I do this. Hunt men like Holloway. It doesn't bring her back, but maybe it keeps someone else from losing what she lost." Rose felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them back hard. "When Daniel died, I thought about it. Giving up. Walking away. But I couldn't. This place was the only thing I had left of him. Of us. I couldn't let the bank take it." Cooper turned his head, meeting her eyes. "So, you forged a deed." She nodded. "So I forged a deed. And I'd do it again." Something shifted in his expression. Not judgment. Understanding. He reached over and touched her hand briefly, just a brush of his fingers, but the contact sent a jolt through her. "Then we'll make sure you don't lose it." The night stretched on, cold and clear. Rose eventually went inside and lay down fully clothed on top of the quilt. But sleep didn't come. She kept seeing Cooper's face when he talked about his sister, kept feeling the ghost of his touch on her hand. She didn't know this man, didn't know if she could trust him beyond the fragile alliance they'd built. But she knew grief when she saw it, and she knew the look of someone who decided to stand between the powerful and the powerless, no matter the cost. It was a dangerous thing to recognize, even more dangerous to admire. When dawn broke gray and cold, Rose got up and made breakfast. She found Cooper in the barn, already awake, checking his guns with methodical precision. She brought him biscuits and bacon wrapped in a cloth. He took them with quiet thanks and ate standing up, his eyes on the road. "Church is at 10, she said. I'll talk to Martin after the service. Cooper nodded. I'll stay out of sight. If Holloway's men are watching, I don't want them connecting us publicly. Rose hesitated. What if Martin won't talk? Then we find another way. Cooper met her gaze. But don't push too hard. If he feels cornered, he'll bolt. Rose nodded and went back to the house to change into her Sunday dress. She braided her hair carefully, pinned on her hat, and tried to look like a woman who wasn't carrying a secret that could destroy her. The ride into town was quiet. Cooper kept his distance, trailing 100 yards behind on a different path. Sunset Creek's church was a simple white building with a crooked steeple. Rose tied her horse outside and walked in with her head high, nodding to familiar faces. Martin Schaffer sat near the back with his wife Emily, who looked even paler than last week. Martin's eyes were red-rimmed, and he wouldn't meet anyone's gaze. The service passed in a blur. Rose stood and sat and sang, and barely heard a word. Her focus was on Martin, on the slump of his shoulders and the way his hands shook when he turned the hymnal pages. When the final hymn ended and people filed out into the sunshine, Rose made her way to Martin's side. Martin, can I talk to you for a moment? He flinched like she'd struck him. His eyes darted toward the door. I really need to get Emily home. Rose lowered her voice. It's about Vance Holloway. Martin went white. His wife was talking to another woman a few feet away, oblivious. Rose touched his arm gently. I know you're in trouble, and I think I can help, but I need you to trust me. Martin's eyes filled with sudden tears. He glanced around frantically, then jerked his head toward the side door. Outside. 2 minutes. Rose slipped out the side entrance and waited in the narrow alley between the church and the dry goods store. Martin appeared a moment later, breathing hard. You don't understand. Holloway owns me. If I talk, he'll destroy me. Rose kept her voice calm. He's destroying you anyway. How much is he paying you? Martin's face crumpled. $500. For changing deed records and pushing through transfers. But Emily's medicine costs more than I can afford. And the bank's threatening foreclosure, and I didn't know what else to do. Rose's heart ached for him. Martin, I need to know what he's planning. What properties is he targeting? Martin wiped his eyes. Yours. The Miller farm. The old Ashford place. And the church property. Rose's blood ran cold. The church. Martin nodded miserably. There's a clause in the town charter. If the church can't pay its taxes for 2 consecutive years, the land reverts to the county. Holloway's been bribing the tax assessor to inflate the valuation. The church can't possibly pay. Once it defaults, Holloway buys it cheap, and the railroad route goes straight through. Rose felt sick. Does Reverend Polk know? Martin shook his head. Not yet. The assessment notice goes out next week. Rose's mind raced. If she could prove this, if she could show the town what Holloway was doing, they'd have leverage. But she needed documentation. Martin, do you have records? Ledgers? Letters? Anything that ties Holloway to the bribes. Martin's face went gray. He keeps everything. Makes me write it all down. He says it's insurance, but I think he just likes having proof of how much control he has. Where? Martin swallowed hard. In his hotel room. A leather case under the bed. I've seen it. Rose felt a surge of desperate hope. If we could get that case? Martin grabbed her arm. his grip surprisingly strong. You can't. He's got 2 armed men and he never leaves that room unattended. You'd be killed. Rose met his terrified eyes. Then help me. Tell the marshal. Testify. Martin let go and stepped back, shaking his head frantically. I can't. Emily needs me. If I cross Holloway, he'll make sure I hang for fraud. He's got all the evidence. Rose's frustration flared. So you'll let him destroy the whole town instead? Martin's face twisted with shame and fear. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But I can't help you. He turned and stumbled back toward the church entrance. Rose stood alone in the alley, her mind spinning. She had information, but no proof. Confirmation, but no leverage. She needed that case. She found Cooper waiting at the livery, saddled and ready. One look at her face, and he knew. What happened? Rose told him everything Martin had said as they rode out of town. Cooper's expression grew darker with every detail. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment. Finally, he said, "We're going after that case." Rose's pulse jumped. How? Cooper's jaw set. Tonight, when Holloway's men are at the saloon. I'll go in through the hotel back entrance, get the case, and get out. Rose shook her head. You'll be shot. Not if I'm fast. And not if I have a distraction. She understood immediately. You want me to create a scene. Draw them out. Cooper met her eyes. I want you to start a fire. Small one, controlled. In the alley behind the saloon. Everyone comes running, including Holloway's guards. I get 10 minutes alone in that room. That's all I need. Rose's hands tightened on the reins. And if something goes wrong, then we run. Fast and far. She studied his face. He meant it. He was willing to risk everything on one desperate gamble. And so was she. All right. Tonight, they spent the afternoon at Juniper Ranch preparing. Cooper cleaned his guns and checked ammunition. Rose gathered lamp oil and rags, her stomach tight with nerves. As the sun dropped toward the horizon, Cooper looked at her seriously. If this goes bad, you get on your horse and ride. Don't wait for me. Don't look back. You head for the territorial marshal in Silver Falls, and you tell him everything. Rose met his gaze. I'm not leaving you. His expression softened slightly. You might have to. She shook her head. We're in this together. That was the deal. Something flickered in his eyes. Not quite a smile, but close. You're stubborn. So are you. They rode into town as full dark fell, leaving their horses tied near the church where they wouldn't be noticed. The streets were busy with Saturday night traffic, the saloon loud and bright. Cooper led her to the alley behind the saloon and showed her where to set the fire. Wait until you see me at the hotel back door. Then light it and run. Once people start shouting, move to the church and wait. If I'm not there in 20 minutes, leave town. Rose nodded, her throat tight. Cooper hesitated, then reached out and touched her cheek briefly. His hand was warm and rough. Be careful. Then he was gone, melting into the shadows like smoke. Rose crouched in the dark, clutching her bundle of oil-soaked rags, and watched the hotel's back entrance. Her heart was hammering so hard, she thought it might break her ribs. Minutes crawled past, Then she saw him. A dark shape slipping up to the hotel door, testing the lock. She struck a match. The rags caught fast, flames licking up the wooden wall. Rose dropped the match and ran. Behind her, someone shouted, "Fire! Fire in the alley!" She ducked around the corner and pressed herself against the church wall, gasping. Boots pounded on the boardwalk. Men yelled. A bell started clanging. Rose counted seconds. 10, 20, 30. She risked a glance around the corner. Half the town was in the street now, forming a bucket line. Holloway's guards were there too, shouting orders. The hotel looked quiet. 40 seconds. 50. Then movement at the back door. Cooper appeared, a leather case tucked under his arm, moving fast. Rose stepped out of the shadows, and he saw her, relief flashing across his face. They met at the corner and ran together, cutting through backlots toward the church. They'd almost reached the horses when someone shouted behind them, "Hey! Stop!" Cooper didn't stop. He shoved the case at Rose. "Ride. Now." She grabbed the case and swung up onto her mare, her skirt tangling, adrenaline screaming through her veins. Cooper was right behind her on his gelding. They kicked the horses into a gallop, just as a gunshot cracked through the night. Rose bent low over her mare's neck, the leather case clutched to her chest. Behind them, more shouts. Another gunshot. Cooper rode beside her, his face grim, his gun drawn. They tore out of town at a dead run, hooves hammering the dark road. Rose's heart was in her throat, her breath coming in gasps. They didn't slow until they were a mile out, the town lights fading behind them. Cooper reined in and turned, scanning the darkness. No pursuit. Yet, Rose was shaking, her hands numb. "We did it." Cooper looked at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, he smiled. A real smile, fierce and alive. "We did." Then his expression changed. "Rose, you're hit." She looked down and saw blood spreading across her sleeve. She hadn't even felt it. The world tilted. Cooper was off his horse in a second, catching her as she swayed. "Easy. Easy. Let me see." He tore her sleeve open. The bullet had grazed her upper arm. Painful, but not deep. Rose laughed shakily. "I've been shot. You've been grazed. There's a difference." Cooper pulled a bandana from his pocket and wrapped it tight around the wound. "You'll live." Rose met his eyes. His face was very close, his hand steady and sure on her arm. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, Cooper cleared his throat and stepped back. "We need to keep moving. They'll come after us." They rode hard for Juniper Ranch, the leather case bouncing against Rose's saddle. When they reached the house, Cooper checked the perimeter while Rose stumbled inside and lit a lamp with shaking hands. He came in a moment later and set the case on the table. "Let's see what we've got." The lock was simple. Cooper broke it with his knife and opened the case. Inside were ledgers, letters, deed copies, and a stack of promissory notes. All in careful handwriting. All damning. Rose stared at the evidence spread across her kitchen table. "This is it. This is everything." Cooper was already reading. his face hard. Bribes to the tax assessor. Payments to Martin. Forged transfers on the Miller farm and the Ashford place. And here, look. A letter from Holloway to a railroad executive detailing the entire scheme. Rose's hands trembled as she picked up the letter. He was bragging. Cooper's smile was cold. Men like Holloway always think they're untouchable. That's how they get caught. Rose looked at him, her arm throbbing, but her heart soaring. What do we do now? Now we take this to the territorial marshal. First thing, in the morning. And we make sure every newspaper in the territory hears about it. Rose's smile faded. Holloway will know it was us. Cooper met her eyes. He already knows. The truth of it settled over her. There was no going back now. They'd crossed a line. Cooper seemed to read her thoughts. Rose, you need to understand. When this goes public, your forgery comes out too. There's no way around it. Her stomach dropped. I'll lose the ranch. Maybe. Or maybe the town rallies around you. You're one of them. Holloway's not. And once people see what he's been doing, they might be willing to overlook how you got your deed. Rose shook her head. That's a lot of maybes. Cooper's voice gentled. I know. But it's the only way forward. You can't build a life on a lie forever. Eventually, it collapses. She knew he was right. She'd known it from the moment he walked into her barn. All right. We go to the marshal. Together. Cooper nodded. Together. They worked for another hour, organizing the evidence and writing a clear statement of facts. Rose's arm ached and her head was pounding with exhaustion. But she kept going. Finally, Cooper looked up. You need rest. We'll leave at dawn. Rose hesitated. Where will you sleep? Cooper glanced toward the door. Barn. Like last night. Rose thought of him out there in the cold, keeping watch while she slept safe inside. Thought of the way he'd caught her when she'd nearly fallen from her horse. The way he'd bandaged her arm with careful hands. Stay in the house. There's a spare room. Cooper's eyebrows went up. People will talk. Let them. You'll be alive. His mouth twitched. He recognized his own words. After a moment, he nodded. All right. Thank you. Rose showed him the small room off the kitchen. Barely big enough for a bed and a chair. It had been Daniel's office once. She hadn't been in it for months. Cooper set his rifle by the door and his saddlebags on the floor. This is fine. Rose lingered in the doorway. Emmett. He turned. It was the first time she'd used his given name. Something shifted in his expression. Thank you. For not arresting me. For believing me. For helping me. Cooper looked at her for a long moment. His tired eyes held something complicated. You're welcome. She should leave. Go to bed. But her feet wouldn't move. Cooper took a step closer. Rose, I need to tell you something. Her pulse quickened. What? When this is over, when Holloway's arrested and the dust settles, I'll have to move on. The railroad will assign me somewhere else. I don't stay anywhere long. The words hit harder than they should have. She'd known him 2 days. She had no claim on him. But disappointment still tightened her throat. I understand. Cooper's jaw tensed. I just don't want you to think that I'm going to disappoint her too, after she'd started to trust him. Rose lifted her chin. I'm not asking you to stay. His eyes searched her face. Aren't you? The question hung between them, raw and real. Rose's heart pounded. She should lie, should protect herself, should keep the walls up. Instead, she stepped closer. If you wanted to, I wouldn't say no. Cooper went very still. Rose, but I'm not going to beg. And I'm not going to wait around hoping. You've got your life, and I've got mine. So when this is done, you make your choice, and I'll make mine. And I'll make mine. She turned and walked out before he could respond, her pulse racing and her cheeks burning. In her own room, she closed the door and leaned against it, breathing hard. What was she doing? Falling for a man she barely knew. A man who'd told her straight out he wouldn't stay. But she couldn't help it. He'd seen her at her worst, her most desperate and dishonest, and he'd chosen to help instead of condemn. He'd trusted her when he had every reason not to. And she'd seen him too. The grief he carried. The justice he fought for. The way he looked at her like she mattered. Sleep didn't come easy. Rose woke before dawn to the sound of Cooper moving quietly in the kitchen. She dressed quickly, braided her hair, and went to find him making coffee. He looked up when she entered. His eyes were shadowed, but his expression was calm. Ready? Rose nodded. As I'll ever be. They drank coffee in silence, the weight of what they were about to do pressing down on both of them. Cooper finally spoke. No matter what happens today, I want you to know something. Rose waited. You're the strongest person I've met. And I'm glad I didn't arrest you. A smile tugged at her mouth, despite everything. I'm glad too. They rode out as the sun broke over the eastern hills, painting the prairie gold and rose. The evidence case was strapped securely to Cooper's saddle. Silver Falls was a half-day ride, a bigger town with a proper courthouse and a territorial marshal who had a reputation for fairness. They reached it by early afternoon, dusty and tired. The marshal's office was a solid brick building near the main square. Cooper tied the horses and took the case, and together they walked inside. Marshal Henry Wade was a gray-haired man with sharp eyes and a weathered face. He looked up from his desk as they entered. Help you. Cooper set the case on the desk. My name's Emmett Cooper. I'm a railroad guard. This is Rose Boone. We have evidence of a land fraud operation being run by Vance Holloway in Sunset Creek. The marshal's eyes sharpened. I know Holloway. Been trying to nail him for years. Show me. They spent 2 hours going through every document. The marshal asked sharp questions and took detailed notes. Cooper answered clearly, his railroad credentials giving weight to the testimony. When they got to Rose's part, the marshal looked at her directly. Mrs. Boone, you understand you're confessing to forgery. Rose met his gaze steadily. Yes, sir. I do. The marshal studied her for a long moment. Then, he looked back at the evidence. Tell me about your situation. Everything, Rose told him. The debt, the bank, the desperation, Daniel's death, and the impossible choice. Cooper's arrival and the decision to fight. When she finished, the marshal sat back in his chair. This is a hell of a mess. Rose's stomach twisted. Yes, sir. But Holloway's crimes are a damn sight worse than yours. The marshal tapped the ledger. Extortion, bribery, fraud on a massive scale. He's been operating in 4 territories, and I've got complaints stacked a foot high. He stood and pulled on his coat. I'm riding to Sunset Creek tonight with 4 deputies. We'll arrest Holloway, his men, and anyone else involved. Cooper, I'll need you to testify. Cooper nodded. I will. The marshal looked at Rose. As for you, Mrs. Boone, I'm not arresting you today. But you'll need to appear before a judge and answer for the forgery. I'll put in a word about the circumstances, but I can't make promises. Rose's throat was tight. I understand. Thank you. The marshal nodded. Get some rest. This isn't over yet. They found a boarding house and took 2 rooms. Rose sat on the narrow bed, staring at the wall, trying to process everything. A knock came at the door. Cooper's voice. Rose, can I come in? She opened the door. He stood in the hallway, hat in hand, looking uncertain. Are you all right? Rose nodded, not trusting her voice. Cooper stepped inside and closed the door behind him. Rose, whatever happens with the judge, I'll testify for you. I'll tell them you had no choice, that you're not a criminal. She looked up at him, tears pricking her eyes. Why do you care so much? His expression broke open. Because I failed my sister. I didn't get there in time. I couldn't save her. But I can help you. And I will. Rose's tears spilled over. She wiped them away roughly. You didn't fail her. You didn't even know. I should have known. I should have been paying attention. Cooper's voice cracked. I've spent 2 years punishing myself for it. Hunting men like Holloway because I couldn't save her. Rose stood and closed the distance between them. She reached up and touched his face, feeling the stubble rough against her palm. Emmett, you can't save everyone. I want to save you. The words hung in the air. Rose's heart broke open. She pulled him down and kissed him. Cooper kissed her back with a fierce hunger that took her breath away. His arms came around her, holding her tight, and she felt 3 years of loneliness and fear crack apart. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cooper rested his forehead against hers. Rose, I can't promise you anything. I'm not asking for promises. I'm asking for now. His eyes searched hers. Then he kissed her again, slower this time, tender and deep. They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other in the fading light, not talking, just being. Finally, Cooper pulled back, his voice rough. I should go. Before I do something we'll regret. Rose caught his hand. Stay. He looked at her, conflict clear on his face. Rose, just stay. Sleep in the chair if you want. I just don't want to be alone tonight. Something in him softened. He nodded. All right. He pulled the chair to the window and sat down, his rifle across his lap. Rose lay down on the bed, still fully dressed, and watched him in the dimness. Emmett. He looked over. Thank you. A faint smile crossed his tired face. Go to sleep. She closed her eyes, listening to him breathe. And for the first time in 3 years, she felt safe. Morning came with a hard knock on the door. The marshal's voice. Cooper. We're riding out. They joined the marshal and his deputies in the gray pre-dawn. 6 men total, all armed and grim-faced. The ride back to Sunset Creek took most of the day. They arrived as evening fell, the town quiet and unaware. The marshal posted deputies at the exits and walked straight into the Grand Hotel with Cooper at his side. Rose waited across the street, her heart in her throat. 10 minutes later, Holloway was dragged out in handcuffs, shouting about lawyers and political connections. His 2 guards came next, disarmed and furious. The marshal loaded them into a wagon and turned to the small crowd that had gathered. Vance Holloway is under arrest for land fraud, bribery, and extortion. If any of you have been threatened or coerced by this man, come to my office and make a statement. A murmur ran through the crowd. Then Martin Schaefer stepped forward, his face pale but determined. I have a statement. The marshal nodded. Come with me. One by one, others came forward. The tax assessor, a farmer, a shopkeeper, all with stories of intimidation and loss. Rose watched from the shadows, relief and fear tangled in her chest. Cooper found her after the wagon rolled away. It's done. Holloway's going to prison. She nodded, unable to speak. And Martin's testifying. That helps your case. The marshal thinks the judge will be lenient. Rose swallowed hard. When? 2 weeks. There'll be a hearing. She looked at him, memorizing his face in the lantern light. Will you stay? Until then. Cooper hesitated. Then he nodded. I'll stay. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of tension and strange quiet. Holloway's arrest had shaken Sunset Creek to its foundations. The mayor resigned. The land office was investigated. Property claims were reviewed and corrected. And Rose waited. Cooper stayed at the ranch, officially as a witness, but really because neither of them could quite let go. They worked side by side, mending fences and tending livestock. They ate meals together and sat on the porch in the evenings, talking about everything and nothing. Rose told him about Daniel, about the good years and the hard ones. Cooper told her about growing up in Missouri, about joining the railroad after his sister died, about the towns he'd passed through and never stayed in. And slowly, carefully, they built something fragile and real. The night before the hearing, Rose couldn't sleep. She found Cooper on the porch, staring at the stars. She sat down beside him. Are you scared? He looked at her. Are you terrified? Cooper took her hand. Whatever happens, you'll survive it. You're stronger than you think. Rose's throat tightened. What if I lose the ranch? Then you start over. Somewhere else. With help. She looked at him. What kind of help? His thumb rubbed circles on the back of her hand. The kind that doesn't leave. Rose's heart stuttered. You're staying. I'm staying. If you'll have me. Tears spilled down her cheeks. She nodded, unable to speak. Cooper pulled her close, and she buried her face in his shoulder, shaking with relief and hope and fear, all tangled together. I love you, she whispered. I know it's too fast and too soon, but I do. Cooper's arms tightened. It's not too soon. I love you too. They held each other under the stars. The future, uncertain, but no longer empty. The hearing was held in the Sunset Creek Church, the only building big enough for the crowd. Rose sat at the front with Cooper beside her, facing Judge Thomas Brennan. The judge was elderly, stern-faced, with a reputation for fairness and zero tolerance for nonsense. He listened to the marshal's testimony. He read the forgery evidence. He heard Martin Schaefer explain Holloway's intimidation tactics and the pressure he'd put on desperate people. Then he looked at Rose. "Mrs. Boone, stand up." Rose stood, her legs shaking. "You forged a legal document to defraud the county and establish a false land claim. That's a serious crime." "Yes, sir. And you did it knowingly, with full awareness of the consequences." "Yes, sir." The judge was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "Tell me about your husband." Rose blinked. "Sir, your husband, Daniel Boone. Tell me about him." Rose took a breath. "He was a good man, hard-working. He loved this land. But he made mistakes. Borrowed money he couldn't pay back, trusted people he shouldn't have. When he died, he left me with nothing but debt and grief." The judge nodded slowly. "And you chose to fight instead of walk away." "I chose to survive." The judge looked out at the crowded room. "I've been a judge for 30 years. I've seen men like Vance Holloway destroy communities and families. I've seen desperate people make desperate choices. And I've learned that the law isn't always the same as justice." Rose's heart pounded. "Mrs. Boone, what you did was illegal, but it was also understandable. You were a widow with no resources and no options, facing a system that didn't care if you lived or died. You made a choice to protect yourself. I can't condone forgery, but I can take circumstances into account." He banged his gavel. "I'm sentencing you to 1 year probation and a fine of $50, suspended pending good behavior. Additionally, I'm ordering a new land survey of Juniper Ranch to determine legitimate boundaries. If the county can establish that you have a valid claim through marriage or adverse possession, your deed will be corrected. If not, you'll have 6 months to vacate." Rose's knees went weak. Cooper caught her elbow. The judge met her eyes. "Don't make me regret this, Mrs. Boone." "I won't, sir." "Thank you." The crowd erupted in murmurs. Rose turned and found half the town on their feet, faces split between approval and disapproval. Reverend Polk stepped forward. "Your Honor, if I may. The church would like to testify that Mrs. Boone has been a valued member of this community. Her husband was known to us, and we have records of their marriage and residence. We'll support her claim in any way we can." The judge nodded. "That will be taken into account during the survey." Rose walked out of the church on shaky legs, Cooper at her side. People stopped her on the steps. Some congratulated her. Some turned away. But most just nodded, acknowledging that she'd survived something hard. Martin Schaffer approached, his face drawn, but his eyes clearer than she'd seen them in weeks. "Rose, I'm sorry. For everything." Rose took his hand. "We all did what we had to. I don't blame you." His wife Emily stepped forward, still pale, but smiling. "Thank you for not giving up on us." Rose's throat tightened. "How are you feeling?" "Better. The marshal helped us get medicine. And Martin's going to testify against Holloway in 3 territories. They're paying him for it." Rose smiled. "That's good. That's really good." They walked away. And Cooper said quietly, "You made a difference." Rose looked up at him. "We did." The land survey took 2 weeks. A crew from the county came out and measured boundaries, checked old maps, interviewed neighbors. They found records of Daniel's original homestead claim and proof of Rose's continuous residence. In the end, Judge Brennan signed a corrected deed in Rose's name. Clear and legal. She stood in the land office holding the document, staring at her name in black ink, and felt something huge settle in her chest. It was real. It was hers. Legitimately. Cooper was waiting outside. He saw her face and smiled. "You did it." She nodded, tears streaming. "We did it." That night, they sat on the ranch porch and talked about the future. Cooper had resigned from the railroad. He'd given his testimony against Holloway and walked away from the job that had consumed him for 2 years. "I don't need to hunt anymore," he said quietly. "I found what I was looking for." Rose looked at him. "What?" "A reason to stop running." She leaned against his shoulder. "What will you do now?" He was quiet for a moment. "I thought maybe I'd help you run this ranch. If you need a partner." Rose's heart swelled. "Are you asking to stay?" "I'm asking to build a life. With you. If you'll have me." She turned to face him fully. "Emmett Cooper, are you proposing?" His mouth quirked. "Not officially. Not yet. I figured we should probably court a bit first. Let people get used to the idea." Rose laughed through tears. "People are already talking. Let them." He cupped her face in his hands. "Rose Boone, I love you. I love your stubbornness and your courage and the way you fight for what matters. I love that you made an impossible choice and survived it. And I want to spend the rest of my life making sure you never have to face impossible choices alone." Rose kissed him, soft and slow and full of promise. Yes. Yes to all of it. 3 months later, on a cold December morning, they stood in the Sunset Creek Church and got married. Reverend Polk officiated. Martin and Emily stood witness. Half the town showed up, curious and supportive in equal measure. Rose wore a simple blue dress and a white shawl. Cooper wore a new suit that made him look uncomfortable and handsome at the same time. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Cooper kissed her like he'd been waiting his whole life to do it. They walked out of the church into bright winter sunshine, hand in hand, and rode back to Juniper Ranch together. The ranch thrived under their partnership. Cooper turned out to have a knack for breeding horses and fixing things Rose had been putting off for years. Rose managed the finances and the livestock with the same fierce competence she'd always had. They worked side by side through planting season and harvest. They sat on the porch in the evenings and talked about plans for the future. They built a life, piece by piece, day by day. And when spring came and Rose realized she was pregnant, Cooper's face lit up with wonder and fierce protectiveness. "You're sure?" Rose nodded, laughing at his expression. "I'm sure." He pulled her close and buried his face in her hair. "Thank you. Thank you for choosing me. I'll always choose you." They named the baby girl Emma, after Cooper's sister. She had Rose's dark hair and Cooper's gray-blue eyes, and she was loud and stubborn and perfect. Rose stood on the porch one evening with Emma in her arms, watching Cooper mend a fence in the golden light. He looked up and caught her watching, and his smile was open and real. She thought about the day he'd walked into her barn with a gun and her life hanging in the balance. Thought about the desperate gamble they'd taken and the trust they'd built. She'd been so afraid of being seen, of anyone looking too closely and finding the lies she'd built her life on. But Cooper had seen her. All of her. The fear and the desperation and the strength underneath. and he'd chosen to stay. Emma fussed, and Rose soothed her, humming an old song her mother used to sing. Cooper finished with the fence and walked over, wiping his hands on his jeans. "How are my girls?" Rose smiled. "Perfect." He kissed Emma's forehead, then Rose's lips. "I love you. I love you too." They stood together in the fading light, watching the sun set over land that was finally, truly theirs. Years passed. Emma grew strong and fearless. Cooper built a new barn and expanded the herd. Rose started a small business selling preserves and baked goods in town. Juniper Ranch became known as a place where drifters could get an honest day's work and a meal, no questions asked. Cooper never forgot what it was like to be desperate. Rose never forgot what it was like to be one bad day from losing everything. They helped where they could, quietly, without fuss. And every night, they sat on the porch together and watched the stars come out over land they'd fought for and won. One evening, when Emma was 5 and running wild through the prairie grass, Cooper said, "Do you ever regret it?" Rose looked at him. "Regret what?" "Forging that deed. Everything that came after." She thought about it seriously, then shook her head. "No. I did what I had to. And it brought me to you." Cooper smiled and pulled her close. "Best forgery I ever investigated." Rose laughed and kissed him, and Emma came running up demanding to be lifted onto Cooper's shoulders. He swung her up easily, and she shrieked with delight, pointing at the hawk circling overhead. Rose watched them, her heart full to bursting. She'd been so sure she had to face the world alone, that trusting anyone was too dangerous, that being seen meant being destroyed. But she'd been wrong. Being seen by the right person, by someone who chose to stand beside you instead of against you, that was the difference between surviving and living. And that was everything. Rose had saved her ranch. But more than that, she'd saved herself. She'd learned that courage wasn't about being fearless. It was about being terrified and choosing to act anyway. She'd learned that love wasn't about perfection. It was about seeing someone's worst and choosing them regardless. And she'd learned that home wasn't just a place. It was people. It was Cooper's steady presence, and Emma's wild laughter, and the knowledge that no matter what came, they would face it together. Sunset Creek had changed too. Holloway's arrest had exposed corruption throughout the territory, and new laws were put in place to protect small landowners. The church got a new tax assessment, fair and reasonable. The Miller farm stayed with the Millers. The Ashford place was bought by a young couple just starting out. Martin Schaffer used the money from testifying to buy proper medicine for Emily, and she slowly recovered. He never touched a bribe again. Years later, he became mayor, and he ran Sunset Creek with honesty and care. People remembered Rose's hearing. Some disapproved. Some understood. Most just moved on, and Rose stopped caring what people thought. She'd built a life on her own terms, with a man who saw her fully and loved her anyway. And that was enough. More than enough. As the stars came out and Emma finally tired herself out, Cooper carried her inside and tucked her into bed. Rose followed, watching him read her a story with patience and tenderness. When Emma was asleep, they went back to the porch. Cooper pulled Rose into his arms and they swayed slowly, dancing to music only they could hear. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For taking a chance on a railroad guard who showed up with a gun and bad news. Rose smiled against his chest. "Thank you for not shooting me." He laughed, and the sound was warm and real, and everything she'd never thought she'd have. They stood together in the dark, holding each other. Two broken people who'd found a way to be whole. And that was the truth.